Good day. Thanks for joining me here. I'm Reed, back at Orchestra Farm for my morning walkabout. And today in particular, I'm thinking again about my men's group that I'm part of and some of the stuff we were talking about last night. In particular, I mentioned in some past videos about the code that we have. And the one that we got into last night was this piece around the masculine being a solar energy, and it's like ever-presenceness, and this notion of the sun doesn't need anything to just continually emitting sunlight, and the penetrating nature of sunlight in the, kind of across existence, really, as far as we can tell so far. And this notion of like that meaning being of service to others or being able to offer to others without needing anything in return, just being able to endlessly give, kind of a thing. And there's only so much time in a night, so not everyone always gets to speak, and I try to refrain from talking because I like talking and I want to hear what other people have to say. And so time ran out last night. I didn't get a chance to speak. And so I'm kind of making this for the guys of the group. And if anyone's interested, the group is part of the Arca Brotherhood, ARKA. And you can check that out online or whatever. But in relation to this, I feel like I have a unique perspective and thought some of the rest of you might enjoy hearing about it too, which is along this idea of, is the sun really just something that, through its nuclear fission, just giving off endless amount of energy? Well, no, because it has a life expectancy, but also I see a lot of fractals in the world. I see that in the plant kingdom a bunch, and on any number of other levels, including in our human world. But let's talk about moving outside, because oftentimes when we look out from the earth, we still maintain a real earth-centeredness, even though Copernicus and Galileo, showed us that the sun is the center of our solar system. And let's take it a step further. The center of our galaxy, this black hole that exists there, and a notion that we have yet to actually, send something into the sun to really see what's happening at the center of it, in the same way that we've never gotten anything into the black hole to experience. I should say experience more than see, for both the sun and the black hole, like what's taking place there. And in some other videos I've shared of talking about my out-of-body experiences, this is actually like a key interest of mine. And in that exploration and in listening to other people's far ideas, I want to put forward the notion that I could be wrong. I'm okay with that. Let's let evidence speak for itself as time elapses, and it might not even be in my lifetime that any of this information, as far as experience goes, comes to light. However, the black hole at the center of our galaxy is rather clearly keeping all of the stars around it in its orbit, similar to the sun having all of the planets in our solar system within its orbit. And with that, a notion that there is a resonant frequency set that is not only, pulling things towards it, as in the black hole, but also offering out energy to them. And when I look at the Earth and I go just one layer below the crust into the mantle, I see that the earth actually resembles the sun in a lot of ways. And this piece of, what is feeding, being of service, and giving to others also needs things to feed it. It's that notion of like, your cup can only overflow into others if there's something else to come and fill your cup. And this question of putting too much faith into things that we don't have answers for. And sometimes that's like exactly what faith is about, is, just believing. And other times it's a recognition of like making sure that the cyclical flows of energy are unimpeded so that all of the different, cups can get filled and overflow to fill the next cup. I kind of see that with parenting often, where it's like, I'm better when my cup is replenished for my kids. I can give them more. And I see this in all kinds of areas of my life. And each time I'm able to recognize and acknowledge the higher power, the greater power, the sun, as it were, or that black hole, as it may well be, that's holding space to let the life flourish, I find more resilience within that, allowing me to offer more and be of greater service and not feel depleted afterwards. I think that there's definite situations where you recognize like, I shouldn't be giving this particular thing any more energy because it's depleting me. And that recognition of like, does the sun ever feel depleted? Again, at some point it will run out of hydrogen and it will go through its own death. Therefore, yes. And time scales are so great. It's pretty fascinating to live on this human scale and recognize a geological scale, and then also recognize a celestial scale. And on the realm of like thinking exponentially, it's really challenging for most people to consider how exponentials work. Now, we can look at like all these trees in the distance here, and in their fractaling of their root systems and their branch systems for the evergreens, their needles or the fir tips, the leaf structures, there's actually an exponentialness there. And it's, pretty hard to fathom it all. Even though you can take in a tree, and then when it expands to a forest, and then that expands to a continent worth of trees, and that expands to a planet worth of ecosystems, and then the interconnection of like, what does it take to have a tree, the water cycle moving, the nutrient cycles moving, let's include like oxygen and carbon dioxide and all these aspects of our living atmosphere that we're all walking through, and a recognition that our eyesight really limits us from seeing everything that's around us. A lot gets lost in translation, as it were. And so when we look to the sun as a yang masculine force, I feel like it's that narrow human perception of like, it's what I can see, and it's not necessarily all that can be felt or experienced. And at this point in my life, that notion of what replenishes me and what replenishes my family, what replenishes my community, what replenishes the soil structure, to then replenish the trees. The cycle of all these energy flows can go on and on for kind of a long time. And that importance of the replenishment, so that everything can keep giving and providing for all of those around, whether they're witnessed or not witnessed. That was a lot of what I was thinking about with that. And with the book I was just reading, and this notion of like, if we would all just plant a tree every year, ideally a native tree is what they were saying, so that is really suited to your environment, and nurture it for several years so that it actually survives, because sometimes you plant a tree and it dies because it doesn't have the nurture. It needs to be babied for a bit. And that interesting question of like recognizing that we all need different kinds of nurturance at different points in time. Like, to think that we could nurture the sun seems ridiculous, but I've listened to enough science fiction novels to recognize that like sometimes they start to like jumpstart a dying star or a dead star. And so those kind of ideas are out there, and getting ourselves to think in these ways that are not obvious, I find is really helpful to actually keep me grounded in what is. So that's what I'm thinking about today. I want to say thanks to the men's group for watching this. It'd be epic if you subscribe to my channel here. I would super love that. I'll provide a link to you guys. And I hope everyone's having a great day. I hope you all have too much fun.